Hey YouTube, I'm Lisa and this is Lisa's Home Cooks. Today we'll be making my favorite quiche. It's a 3-layer quiche with caramelized onions, spinach, and blue cheese. Not the kind of quiche you whip up with the leftovers you have in your fridge, but if you put the time and effort, it will definitely impress your friends at the dinner party or make your boyfriend's parents fall in love with you. So, let's get on with it. For this recipe, we're going to need white flour, butter, milk, cream, and 4 eggs for the pastry and for the custard. And then for our filling, we're going to use a whole bunch of spinach, a couple of red onions, blue cheese. I chose to use quite mild Roquefort cheese, a lot more butter, sugar, red wine, just the wine you use for cooking, and some nutmeg. So every quiche starts by making short crust pastry, and short crust pastry always starts with really cold butter. We're going to put in the effort and chop it into really small cubes. And then we're going to take 2 cups of flour, put it in our food processor, add in a pinch of salt and our butter. You can also make this by hand, but honestly, I'm lazy and I don't feel like it today. But you do you. And just combine it really quickly until it looks like sand. Now is the time to add 1 egg. I really like the flavor and the texture it gives the pastry. And we're going to combine it really quickly, just a few more pulses until the egg disappears. And now we're going to add the tiniest amount of water, really, slowly and gradually, just until the dough starts to combine and stick to one side. If we add too much water, then the pastry is going to shrink while baking, and our filling is going to overflow, and the quiche is not going to turn out right. So the sign I use to know when to stop mixing is when the pastry kind of sticks to one side and you can see the chunks are in there, but it's not all one blob of dough. And that's the point where it is enough and we can stop mixing, transfer it to a baking sheet, and put it in the fridge. Now, the thing with short crust pastry is that if you overwork the dough or melt the butter, the texture just won't be right. The dough will come out firm and not flaky, so you want to touch it really as little as possible, minimal heat, minimal processing. So we're going to clump it together and then we're going to fold the sheet over it. And while we do it, we're also going to smush it down so it's easier to roll out afterwards. And then we're going to fold it into a little envelope so it doesn't get any funny scents from the fridge. Slap it goodbye and put it into the refrigerator for about 30 minutes up to 1 hour. Now, while the pastry chills, we can start making our filling. And the first layer of our filling is a whole bunch of spinach. Now, I love spinach. It's healthy, it's delicious, but the thing I like the most about it is that it has the magical ability to disappear on a hot pan. So take as much spinach as you have, throw it onto a hot pan, and just let it steam without any oil or water until it just completely disappears and reduces to the smallest amount of matter possible. Near the end, make sure to mix it a little bit just so the bottom doesn't burn. But once reduced, just turn off the heat, set it aside to cool, and we can move on to the next layer of our quiche. Now we're going to heat up some olive oil in a pan, and we're going to add 2 chopped red onions. We're going to cook it until nice and translucent, and then add 1 tablespoon of sugar so it gets caramelized. We're going to add 1/3 of a cup of red wine, just something nice that you would drink, and cook it until evaporated and set the onions aside. So now with our pastry chilling and our fillings ready, now it's time to make the third component of every quiche, the custard. So every custard is just a combination of eggs and dairy. And there's a really nice trick that I recently learned how to know the exact ratio of the liquids in your custard. So you can just add your eggs to a cup, and then the ratio of milk is just twice the volume of eggs that you use. So here we have about 100 milliliters of egg. So we know that we need to add 200 milliliters of dairy. And I'm going to add 100 milliliters of milk and then another 100 milliliters of cream to get that nice combination. You can actually use only cream if you want a richer custard, or you can use only milk if you're trying to lose some weight or just stick to your diet. Now we go ahead and transfer all the liquids to a bowl, and then we need to fetch our whisk and just whisk it all together. until smooth. That's it. Nice and creamy. We add a pinch of salt, a tiny bit of freshly ground pepper, and we finish it off with a small pinch of nutmeg. And that's it. That's our custard. So now that we have our steamed spinach, it still has a lot of moisture in it. So we want to just squeeze it out, take it, and just squeeze it with our hands. You can actually use frozen spinach if you want to skip this part, but I actually find it pretty amusing. We just squeeze any remaining liquids. And then we just chop it to nice pieces. And this will make sure that our quiche stays crispy and that we don't get a soggy bottom. So now it's time to finally assemble our quiche. I'm going to start by taking the pastry out of the fridge and covering it with an additional baking sheet so it's easier to roll out. I like smushing it a few times with a rolling pin, especially if it stayed for a longer time in the fridge, to kind of get things going and make it easier to roll out. Now we're going to try and roll it out in a circular shape as much as possible. I like rotating the pastry as I go, and I'm aiming to reach the size of my baking dish, which is 9 inches. Once it looks like it's about the right size, you can take the dish and measure it, and if it fits, just take the pastry and flip it over the dish. Now we can start lining it. And listen, there's 1,000 different opinions and ways how to correctly line a dish, but my personal favorite is just kind of folding the pastry over the edges, letting it fall, and pushing it with my fingers into the edges, working kind of quickly so not to heat it up too much. And when I'm satisfied with the results, I just take the paper out and use the rolling pin to trim the edges. And now all that is left is to let the pastry rest in the freezer for a while. After about 15 to 30 minutes, the pastry is completely frozen. We can take it out and blind bake. Line it with one of the baking sheets we've used and fill it with pie weights, or I just used beans. Bake for about 10 minutes covered in 350 Fahrenheit or 180 Celsius, and then remove the paper and the weights and bake for extra 10 minutes until slightly golden. Now it's time to combine the ingredients. Start by putting in the onions and arranging them nicely, and then top with the spinach. I mean, doesn't this look lovely? Look at the contrasting color. I love how the purple and the green look together, and it's even prettier when you crumble some blue cheese on top. Eventually, you're going to top it all off with the custard. Just make sure not to over pour because it might end up pouring out from the side while baking like it happened to me. Now, remember that the pan is hot. We just took it out of the oven. We can carefully transfer it back to the oven in the same temperature of 350 Fahrenheit or 180 Celsius and bake for about 40 to 50 minutes until nice, puffy, and golden. Bow chicka wow wow. When the quiche is ready, take it out and let it rest for a few minutes before trying to take it out of the pan. Now you can see that I actually did not listen to my own advice and I overfilled the quiche. So you can see there's a bit of filling stuck on the outside, but don't worry, that's actually crunchy and delicious. To serve, take a generous slice and serve it with some vegetables, a side salad, or just eat it on its own, hot or cold. It is delicious in any shape or form.